My name is Alyssa Johnson, and I'm a 23-year-old office worker, married for 2 years. I'm a proud mother to my son, Leo, who just turned 1. My husband, Nathan, is 29, and he also works for a company, though, unfortunately, not one I'm particularly proud of. Our life together, once full of love and promise, has begun to feel strained. Nathan, for reasons I can't quite understand, frequently suggests that I quit my job at my father's company. His disdain for my parents is no secret. Nathan has never been comfortable with the fact that my father is a high school dropout who runs a small, gritty business manufacturing screws and small components. Nathan hates the idea of being associated with such a company, and his feelings toward my father have only worsened over the years. But despite Nathan's objections, I admire my father more than ever. His tireless dedication, his courage in the face of failure, and his genuine care for his employees, all of it inspires me. I can't fathom quitting my job at the company he built. It's part of who I am. Nathan, however, seems to take my respect for my father as a personal affront. I know he doesn't like that I hold my father in higher regard than I hold him, and that only seems to fuel his bitterness. One morning, as I sat down to breakfast with Nathan and our son Leo, the conversation turned to my job once again. "Alyssa, you really should think about getting a job at a bigger company," Nathan suggested, his voice dripping with frustration. "You graduated from a prestigious university. You're beautiful, and I want to brag about you at work. But I can't because your workplace is awful. Honestly, I earn enough for us. Why don't you consider becoming a housewife?" I had heard this before, over and over again. Each time Nathan made his case, I reminded him that I had no intention of leaving my father's company. But the conversation always ended the same way, with Nathan's threatening remarks hanging in the air. "You're the only one in the world who doesn't listen to me," he'd say, his tone cold and accusing. "If you keep this up, it's going to be harder for us to stay together." And just like that, the conversation would end. Nathan would leave the house, and I'd be left to stew in the aftermath, wondering when this would all finally end. But the tension didn't disappear. After every one of these discussions, Nathan would do something to upset me even more, then gloat with that smug satisfaction only he could muster. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to even think about divorce. Our parents get along so well, and they adore Leo. The thought of tearing apart the delicate fabric of their relationships felt unbearable. My father and father-in-law have been good friends for years, enjoying golfing and fishing trips together. My mother and mother-in-law have an equally strong bond, regularly attending art exhibitions and spending time together. Leo is the center of both of their worlds. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that my love for Nathan had withered away. The connection that once made us a couple seemed to have faded, and I began to feel more alone in this marriage than I ever had before. Even the thought of sleeping in the same bed as Nathan made me uneasy. Since Leo was born, I had been sleeping in the child's room, locking the door at night. The lock was a necessity. Nathan had a disturbing habit of barging into the room while I was sleeping with Leo, ranting about my father's company. His voice was always loud and angry, and Leo would wake up scared, crying in the dark. That was the breaking point for me. I added the lock on the door as a safety measure, and Nathan eventually stopped coming in at night. But I couldn't shake the unease, so I continued locking the door, just to be safe. That morning, when Nathan started his usual tirade about my father's company, something inside me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. His words were sharp, cutting through the silence of the morning like a knife. "You need to quit that terrible company, Alyssa. It's not good for you. Not good for our family." But what hurt more than the words themselves was the fact that Nathan never once asked me how I felt, never once cared to understand my side of things. It was always about what he wanted, what he thought was best. And when I stood my ground, he'd get angry and say things that didn't make sense. The threats of divorce, the constant undermining of my choices, it was too much. In that moment, I realized that the marriage I had once believed in was no longer the same. I had changed. My priorities had shifted. I loved my son, and I loved my father, but I couldn't keep living under Nathan's oppressive thumb. I needed a life where I could be proud of myself, where I didn't have to apologize for who I was. I didn't know where this path would lead. Would I continue to endure Nathan's emotional abuse for the sake of our families? Or would I finally have the courage to stand up for myself and my father's company? Only time would tell. It was, as always, petty. Despite dinner being ready, Nathan didn't come home. Instead, he went to a night bar with his colleagues and sent me a photo of himself, flashing a big smile with his face close to one of the female staff. I wasn't hurt by the photo. It didn't make me feel insecure. I've seen this act before. As soon as I saw the photo pop up in my messaging app, a new message followed. See? This is how I blow off steam, because you won't listen to me. His words hit like an emotional slap, yet I remained calm. He continued, if you don't want me to do this anymore, quit your father's company. Honestly, I wanted to ignore his message. I wanted to let it go, but for the sake of our son Leo and both our sets of parents, I responded. My best response, a simple and careful one. I just wanted you to come straight home and have dinner with us. Nathan's reply came quickly. Must have been tough, huh? I'm coming home now. But deep down, I regretted marrying him. I thought to myself, even though he's smart, his character and thought process are so childish, so petty. Was this really the man I had chosen to build a life with? One day, Nathan came home beaming with excitement. I might be getting promoted soon, he reported, as if this news was supposed to change everything. Wow, that's great, I replied. Did that recent deal come through? It's not finalized yet, but it's as good as done, Nathan said confidently. I bet the boss will be thrilled, crying with joy. Even the director, who used to act all high and mighty, will have to bow down to me now. That day, Nathan didn't mention anything about me quitting my father's company. He went off to his work, and I left home with Leo to go to my office as usual. After dropping Leo off at my parents' house nearby, I headed to work. Upon arriving at the office, my coworker Jake hurriedly approached me. Good morning, Alyssa. The boss seems unusually angry today. Did something happen? Everyone's worried about him. Intrigued, I knocked and entered the room labeled Invention Room, where my father was. To my surprise, there was a young man in his 20s sitting on the sofa, his face tear-streaked. Across from him, my father looked angrier than I'd ever seen him. Sorry, Alyssa. I can't spare the time to chat with you right now, my father said, his voice firm. Everyone's worried about you. What's going on? I asked, concerned. He sighed and invited me to sit in on the conversation. As I took a seat next to my father, the young man stood up to introduce himself. Nice to meet you, I'm Scott. I'm really sorry for causing the boss any trouble. I turned to Scott. May I know what happened? Scott explained that he worked for an electrical machinery manufacturer and had recently been promoted to assistant leader for a new machinery project. The designated leader, however, didn't attend meetings or visit the field, essentially serving as a figurehead. So, Scott had essentially been filling in the role of the leader himself. It turned out that some components from my father's company were chosen for the project. Scott, without prior arrangement, had visited my father's company and rudely demanded to speak with the CEO. His appearance, with unkempt hair and numerous rings, didn't sit well with my father's secretaries, Jackson and Randy. They told Scott, please adjust your attitude and appearance before coming back. Confused about why they had said this, Scott returned to his company. His boss told him, don't let them walk all over you. Assert yourself. Tell them we're using their parts. Scott then went back to my father's company, but this time, he humbly asked Jackson and Randy, please let me know what I'm doing wrong. My father, who happened to overhear the conversation, pulled Scott aside and spoke with him privately in the meeting room. We don't judge people by their appearances. I believe they were just trying to teach you workplace matters, my father explained. Jackson and Randy nodded in agreement. They then proceeded to give Scott a crash course in professional etiquette. With such an appearance, when you visit other companies, they'll likely judge your entire company based on how you present yourself. When asked, which company do you think would make a decent impression? One where people are well-dressed and respectful of manners, or one that isn't? Scott, now humbled, replied, the former. Let me apologize and start again. Afterward, Scott made an appointment and showed up at my father's company with his back straight, his hair fixed, and no accessories. As we spoke with him, we could see his sincerity and commitment to his work, not only in terms of the components, but in his willingness to collaborate with ideas and knowledge. My father was impressed with Scott's change in demeanor and his professional attitude. "I think this young man has great potential," he said. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting more on the situations at home and at work. Nathan's petty actions were beginning to feel like a reflection of his inability to mature or respect others. On the other hand, Scott's growth, his willingness to listen and change, was a breath of fresh air. I couldn't help but compare the two men in my life. Nathan's refusal to change, his childlike demands, and his emotional manipulation weighed heavily on me. But Scott, his earnestness, his ability to accept constructive criticism and grow, showed me what it meant to be truly dedicated to one's work and character. Perhaps it was time for me to take a step back and reassess everything. My marriage, my family, and even my role at my father's company. I had always put everyone else first, but now it felt like it was my turn to focus on myself and what truly mattered. Collaboration between Scott's company and my father's was progressing well. Young members of Scott's team were proactively visiting my father's company for advice, eager to learn and grow. But just before the completion of a prototype, after nearly 6 months of hard work, a shocking revelation hit. It was discovered that the leader of Scott's team had taken all the prepared presentation materials. Even worse, the assistant leader, Scott's role model and the one who had been instrumental in the project, was removed, and a young female employee whom the leader favored was promoted in his place. This move sparked immediate opposition from the team, but they were swiftly silenced with threats. Anyone who objects will be made uncomfortable in the company by spreading various rumors, they were told. Upon hearing this, my father was furious. Jackson, who had been listening in the background, said, "About those rumors, don't worry. They're just lies, right? You shouldn't be scared." Scott explained the situation further. The assistant leader had reported a violation of working hours to HR, and after severe warnings, he was removed. Now, Scott was frustrated. Despite everything he had done for the team, the leadership was changing again, and he felt betrayed. So, he came to my father's company to discuss it. "You should quit that company and come work for ours, right, boss?" Scott said, trying to lighten the mood. At that moment, my father, impersonating an iconic Western movie character, made everyone burst into laughter, except Scott, who was still visibly upset. Scott looked at my father and said, "Despite doing such amazing work, you all seem to be having fun. I really admire that. I wanted to work with you all so badly," he said, bowing his head in gratitude. "I'm truly grateful to your husband for giving me the opportunity to work at my company." There was something that had been bothering me after listening to his story. I hesitantly asked Scott, "What's the name of your company?" When Scott answered, it turned out to be the same machinery manufacturing company as Nathan's. Then, trying to keep my voice steady, I asked, "Can I ask who the leader is?" Scott looked at me, and after a brief hesitation replied, "His name is Nathan Johnson." The shock hit me hard. My father and I froze for a moment in silence. After a few seconds, Randy broke the quiet. I knew I'd heard that name before. It's Alyssa's husband." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. I barely managed to say, "Scott, I'm sorry, that's my husband." Scott blinked in surprise but quickly added, "Oh, that's fine. I really am grateful to him for giving me this opportunity." Jackson, ever cautious, seemed to have something on his mind. "I hate to ask, but given that Alyssa's here, does this favored female employee have any relation to your husband?" Scott looked at me, and for a moment, he seemed to hesitate, as if struggling to find the right words. Finally, I sighed and reassured him, "Don't worry about it. I'm in a sham marriage with my husband. I don't have feelings for him anymore." This seemed to surprise my father, who looked at me with a mixture of concern and understanding. After a few moments of silence, he apologized, and I told him everything that had been happening, how Nathan had treated me and what I'd endured. My father nodded solemnly. "No wonder Leo hasn't been very affectionate with me," he said, his voice soft with concern. After hearing everything, he added, "I've lived a life that I'm not ashamed of, so I don't care what anyone says about me." But it must be tough for Alyssa to keep hearing bad things about her parents. He placed a hand on my shoulder and smiled. "Don't worry. I'll keep my relationship with their parents since they're family and friends. If you ever want to come home, you're always welcome." His words felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt some relief, an emotional release. "How about the relationship between your husband and this favored female employee?" Jackson asked, breaking the moment of quiet. Scott replied, "There's no solid evidence, just rumors. But it's the talk of the company. Several employees have seen them coming out of meeting rooms or document rooms together. Some have even seen them going out for lunch." Hearing this, Randy immediately sprang into action. He made a phone call. "Hey, I've got a case that I'd like you to investigate. Can you come to the office right now?" After hanging up, he turned to us and said, "I'm going to have a friend of mine at a private detection agency look into this." Jackson wasn't far behind, picking up the phone as well. "Hello? I need a lawyer who specializes in divorce due to infidelity. Can you come to the office right now? Thanks." As Jackson and Randy made progress on their calls, my father turned to Scott and said, "Your greatest strength has to be your ability to take action." The words felt heavy with meaning. It wasn't just about work or business. It was about taking control of your life and the people in it. And right now, I needed that sense of action more than ever. As the plans were set in motion, I felt like everything was slowly starting to unravel. Scott's story had opened my eyes to a level of betrayal I hadn't fully understood before. Nathan's actions, his connections, his favors, it was all coming to light. I knew I had to make decisions soon. The wheels were turning and things were about to change, both at work and at home. My relationship with Nathan was barely holding together, and it was clear that it would take more than just one conversation or one change of heart to fix the cracks. But for now, I had to focus on the next step. With the investigation underway and the legal options being explored, it felt like a turning point was near. As the day unfolded, everyone returned to their workstations, and the atmosphere in my father's company started to return to normal. My father, ever the source of calm, reassured his concerned employees with a smile. "I'm sorry for any worry caused, but it seems we can all laugh about it now. My apologies, and thank you for your understanding." The tension lifted, and smiles spread across the faces of the staff. The lively energy of the workplace quickly returned, as it always did after a storm. My father, sensing I still had some lingering unease, came over and asked, "Alyssa, may I discuss the recent events with your in-laws?" I hesitated for a moment but replied, "I just want you to tell them to continue visiting and showing affection for Leo, as they always have." By early afternoon, a private detective and a lawyer arrived to discuss our future course of action. We gathered in the planning room, where the contents of the meeting were shared with everyone present. The plan was set. Jackson, who had returned to the company, would convey the details of the discussion after work. Later that day, when I went to pick up Leo from my parents' house, I sat down to explain everything from my perspective. I apologized for not revealing Nathan's true nature sooner. I felt guilty, as if I had trampled on the feelings of my parents, who had believed my marriage was happy. To my surprise, my mother wasn't upset. Instead, she seemed thrilled. "Now we need to prepare a room for my daughter and grandson," she declared, her tone light and eager. She had long suspected Nathan's disdain for my father's company, particularly the first time he had visited, and looked down on it with contempt. "I wish you had told me sooner," she said, her voice tinged with regret. The next day, Jackson received a phone call on his smartphone. It was Scott. He had submitted his resignation, informing the company that he intended to spend his remaining time handling miscellaneous tasks and transitioning his responsibilities without taking any paid time off. The company accepted his resignation, but it didn't stop there. The members of Scott's project team, united in their opposition to the treatment they'd received, visited the HR department to state, "We have all violated the company's work rules like Mr. Scott, so please discipline us as well." Upon seeing resignation letters in their hands, the HR department was thrown into disarray. Meanwhile, My husband had already left the house by the end of regular working hours, and a meeting was convened in the large conference room. Present were the company president, department heads, and the remaining project members, including Scott. It was revealed that Nathan, the team leader, had been absent from most meetings, had not contributed to the project, and had taken credit for the work done by the team. It was reported that Nathan had removed Scott from his position as deputy leader and replaced him with a female employee he favored. The company president reportedly expressed deep regret if these allegations were true. Scott, however, suggested that no drastic action be taken until all evidence was gathered. He explained that as the sister-in-law of one of the company's clients, they were also conducting an investigation using a private detective. He proposed waiting to question Nathan until all evidence was collected, and the company agreed to hold off on any disciplinary action until then. When Nathan returned home that evening, he was in an unusually good mood. He boasted about how useless everyone else had been and how he had worked overtime to ensure the project's success. "Everyone's just jealous because I'm going to be promoted to department head after the project's success," he said with a smug grin. I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly at his delusions. In his state of excitement, I gave him a few compliments which I didn't mean, but he seemed to enjoy them nonetheless. He beamed, envisioning himself as the future department head, looked up to by everyone, and admired by all. The next day, Scott's plan began to take shape. Members of the project team began to shower Nathan with excessive praise. "Mr. Department Head, not quite yet, but it seems the CEO is very hopeful about this project," one of them said. "How can we become competent men like you, Mr. Johnson?" Flattered by the constant compliments, Nathan's guard began to drop. He was in a constant state of excitement, and it was becoming clear that his ego was swelling. At the same time, the hidden cameras that had been set up in the document room and conference room were capturing everything. In just 5 days, a mountain of evidence of Nathan's affair had been collected by the private detective, with Scott also helping to gather crucial information. All that was left was to prove that Nathan had not been the one to create the project documents. Proof of Nathan's absence from the project was easy to obtain. We had already gathered testimonies from Scott and other team members about Nathan's lack of contribution. Furthermore, the evidence of his affair was irrefutable, leaving only the final piece of the puzzle, proving that Nathan had taken credit for the team's hard work. As the pieces began to fall into place, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would come out. The plan had been set in motion, and Nathan's world was about to collapse around him. What had once seemed like a stable career and marriage for him was about to be shattered by his own lies and deceit. Scott had also saved all the crucial project documents on a USB drive. If the company had simply asked him or Nathan about the contents, the truth would be laid bare. All the evidence was submitted to the company by Scott and the project team, leaving Nathan unaware that his downfall was imminent. That evening, Nathan came home in high spirits, oblivious to the storm brewing. He launched into another flight of fantasy, declaring, "I'm definitely going to be made department head." The CEO talked to the current department head for a long time, and then the head looked at me. He probably said, "I'd rather have Mr. Johnson as head than any incompetent like you." He continued, "The gap between your father's company and mine will only widen from here. You should quit your job and become a full-time housewife. You'll be the wife of a department head." My patience, already worn thin, snapped. I shot back, my voice louder than I intended. "Your parents will be furious if they knew you were mocking mine. They're good friends. I take pride in my work and enjoy it. I will not quit." Nathan's expression darkened, and he snapped, "Never invite your parents to our family events again. If you don't like it, get out. I'll have women flocking around me as soon as I become department head." I met his defiant words with calm determination. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice steady. "What do you mean?" "Don't contact me again," he shot back, turning his back to me. I stood there, resolute. "All right, I'll leave." In that moment, I handed him the prepared divorce papers. He glanced at them, still too proud and arrogant to fully grasp the situation, but I knew what I needed to do. The finality of those papers would seal my escape. The next morning, Nathan left for work in silence, still unaware of the chain of events unfolding around him. I immediately called my father to help me with the move. As we began loading our belongings onto the truck, my in-laws arrived at my parents' house. "We came to help," they said, their faces apologetic but genuine. My father-in-law, though visibly distraught by the situation, gave me a respectful bow. "I'm sorry for everything," my mother-in-law added, her voice soft. "Thank you for letting us be Leo's grandparents. Our idiot son is disowned. We're counting on you from now on, Alyssa." As they both bowed, I took their hands in mine and replied, "Thank you," while bowing my head in respect. Despite the turmoil, I felt a sense of clarity. They were genuinely remorseful for Nathan's behavior, and I was ready to move forward. My father, ever the practical one, urged, "Let's hurry up and move so we can relax at home." My father-in-law, ever willing to help, smiled and said, "Let's do that," before continuing to lend a hand with the move. The process went smoothly, and when we finally finished, I stood in front of my parents and in-laws. I showed them the signed divorce papers. "I'm getting a divorce," I said calmly, the weight of the words settling around us. My in-laws apologized repeatedly, but my father responded with a warm, reassuring smile. "Let's continue to get along, Ken," he said, giving my father-in-law a playful pat on the knee. My mother joined in. "Mary, let's continue to do embroidery together. There's an art exhibition next week. Let's go," she added, playfully patting my mother-in-law's knee. It was a strange but comforting sight to see my parents and in-laws getting along so well. The tension, once so overwhelming, had begun to dissipate, replaced by a calm sense of unity. As they chatted and laughed, I decided to retreat to Leo's room and get some sleep, not wanting to disrupt the moment. The next day, Nathan was called into a conference room by the company's executives, including the CEO and the department head. Present were Scott, the team members, and Alice, the female employee Nathan had been having an affair with. The room was heavy with tension as the CEO began the questioning. He turned to Nathan and asked, "Did you intend to claim this project as your own without participating in it, stealing the documents once they were completed?" Scott and the team members were present, and it seemed Nathan had no way out. He couldn't deny the facts, and his silence was his only response. The CEO grew impatient with Nathan's lack of answers. He leaned forward, his voice booming. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Reluctantly, Nathan admitted to his actions, his voice small compared to his usual bravado. The CEO wasn't done yet. He pressed further, asking, "Why did you remove Scott from his position as deputy leader and replace him with a female employee?" Nathan, ever the opportunist, tried to defend his decision. "I thought she was more capable than Mr. Scott." The department head scoffed. "Are you saying the lady who does nothing more than serve tea and make copies is more capable than Mr. Scott?" Nathan's face flushed as he bit his lip and lowered his head, falling silent. The CEO's next move was swift. He projected still images from the hidden video footage captured in the conference room and the document room. The footage clearly showed Nathan and Alice in compromising positions. Both Nathan and Alice turned pale as the evidence flashed before them. The CEO turned to Alice and asked, "Miss Ford, what is the meaning of this?" The moment the video footage was revealed, the reality of Nathan's deceit hit him like a wave. There was no escaping the truth now. As the evidence mounted against him, it was clear that his time at the company, and possibly in his marriage, was running out. As Nathan sat there, unable to defend himself, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. He had lived his life believing he could manipulate those around him, but now the consequences of his actions were catching up with him. Alice, seemingly unfazed by the gravity of the situation, responded to the CEO's questions with an air of indifference. "Mr. Johnson said that if we were together, he'd make it easy for me to earn my salary. Besides, I have a boyfriend, so I wasn't serious about being with him. I just thought of it as part of the job," Alice confessed, her voice cold and unapologetic. Her words hit Nathan like a slap in the face. Infuriated, he shouted, You had a boyfriend? You cheating woman. You've ruined my life. You have a wife too, Tim." His anger was palpable, his hands clenched into fists. Alice, unfazed, retorted, "Don't get mad at me, Nathan." The tension in the room escalated quickly as the verbal confrontation between the two of them turned into a full-blown argument. Fed up with the chaos, the CEO intervened, his voice sharp. "Fact-checking is over. I'll inform you of the disciplinary action later. Until then, Mr. Johnson and Miss Ford, you're both suspended. Stay at home." With that, the CEO walked out of the conference room, leaving behind a trail of tension. The other executives and team members quickly followed suit, leaving Nathan and Alice alone to stew in the mess they had created. The consequences of Nathan's actions were swift and severe. He was reassigned to a menial position in the company, tasked with sorting documents in the basement, a department that everyone knew was considered the most useless and thankless in the company. It was a far cry from the lofty position he had once imagined for himself. Alice, too, paid the price for her involvement in the affair. When her boyfriend discovered the betrayal, she faced intense scrutiny at the office. Ultimately, she resigned from her position, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. Meanwhile, the legal fallout continued. A lawyer had prepared an agreement that required Nathan and Alice to pay hefty consolation amounts. Nathan would owe me $3 million, and Alice would be required to pay $2 million. Both had to take loans from consumer finance companies to cover the payments, a desperate move that only added to their financial ruin. In addition to the financial settlement, I secured an agreement from Nathan to pay $5,000 a month in child support for Leo. This was a small consolation, but it was something I could rely on for Leo's future. Months passed, and the consequences for Nathan only deepened. Having been disowned by his parents, he found himself working 2 jobs just to survive. During the day, he worked at a convenience store, and at night, he served as a security guard for a parking lot. The life he had once envisioned, filled with power and success, had crumbled into a grim existence. I heard from someone who had seen him that Nathan had aged dramatically. He looked as if he were 60 years old, his face worn and haggard. The once confident and arrogant man had been reduced to a shadow of his former self. As for me, I was finally free. No longer bound by the toxic marriage, I found peace in my new life. I focused on Leo, my career, and building a future for myself, far away from the chaos Nathan had brought into my life. My parents, who had been my pillars of support throughout this ordeal, continued to show me love and care. My in-laws, too, had come to accept the truth and express their deep regret for Nathan's actions. Though it was painful to part ways with them, I knew it was for the best. Leo grew up in a loving and stable environment, and I made sure to nurture his potential. I became more confident, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life as well. As for Nathan and Alice, they were left to deal with the consequences of their choices. Their paths, once intertwined with ambition and deceit, had diverged into separate lives of regret and hardship. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribe for more.